What are the necessary components of the creative process? That's one of the things that we will be talking about today in correlation with Sonnets to Orpheus, Sonnet 16. Welcome to Strip Cover Lit, where we squeeze the bigger picture out of literature. I am Adrian Fort, and we are here for another poetry discussion, which will appear in two playlists here on the channel. Number one being the poetry discussion playlist, and number two being the Ranier Maria Rilke playlist here on the channel. Now, I was not particular. I'm still not particularly versed with Rainier Maria Rilke's poetry. I do know that he is. So he's maybe not the best known poet, maybe not a particularly well known poet, but the people who know him absolutely seem to swear by his poetry. And this video is being made for Sophie, who requested Sonnet 16 from Rilke's Sonnets to Orpheus. But the reason I bring up not being particularly versed in Rilke is I had no idea that there are two separate sonnets to Orpheus lists. The first one I think is 23 sonnets or something, and I think or 26. The second one's like 29. I didn't know that, so I never asked for clarification if it's the first 16 or the second 16. So I will be tackling both at some point, probably this month. But the poem in question today, the Sonnets to Orpheus 1, Sonnet 16, reads as such. You are lonely, my friend, because you are. We, with a word or a finger sign, gradually make the world our own, though perhaps its weakest, most precarious part. How can fingers point out a smell? Yet of the dark forces that lurk at our side, you feel many. You know the dead, and you shrink away from the magic spell. Look, we two together must bear piecework and parts as if they were the whole. But be careful, above all, don't plant me inside your heart. I'd outgrow you, but I will guide my master's hand, and will say, Here, this is Esau, beneath this pelt. So this here, Esau, I'm not I'm not a church attenderer, but Esau was the brother of Jacob, and both of them were the sons of Isaac. And from what I know, the most prevalent reference to Esau, and indeed, I believe what is being referenced here, is that his brother Jacob was the younger son. Isaac, the father, was blind by this point in his life, and in order to trick Isaac, because Jacob's brother Esau was particularly a particularly hairy individual, he donned an animal pelt in order to trick his blind father into giving him the inheritance or the kingdom. Either way, they would be sort of the kingdom, the inheritance, basically. I think that is the story there. So basically, by saying, I will guide my master's hand and say, Here, this is Esau beneath his pelt, is saying, from what I can understand, this is the real thing under the fake thing of the real thing. Meaning it's not Jacob under the pelt. It's still the real thing, just wearing the coat to trick you into thinking it was the real thing. Now, I don't really understand that part of the poem. I would be interested in understanding it. I couldn't really find a great explanation for it. But there seem to be two primary interpretations of this poem, and both of them, the central sort of argument seems to be who is the speaker? So when the speaker says, I will guide my master's hand, pardon me, who is it that says that? And that would sort of let us know who the master is. Now, one interpretation here is the speaker is actually something approximating poetry itself, the creative process itself. In this case, the so there's still an interpretation to be had. Is the master then the poet, or is the audience then the poet? Either one of those possibly being Rilke himself. The second is that the speaker is the voice of the dead, something approximating the dead, to the audience, again being perhaps Rilke himself. And the, I think, second interpretation there holds a little bit of extra weight because of the fact that the first series of sonnets to Orpheus was written in something like a divine fervor after the death of, and I'm going to slaughter this name, Vera Aucamp Noop, at the age of just 19, possibly to leukemia, who was an acquaintance of Rilke, and his mother was I believe, a well-known patron of the arts. So at her death, Rilke kind of, I think he went to Switzerland, or was in Switzerland. Look, again, I'm no expert in Rilke, but in sort of a divine fervor, ended up whipping up the sonnets to Orpheus and finishing other projects on which he was working. So the main thing that I want to talk about here, surprise, it's loneliness. If you spent any amount of time on the channel, you know this is one of my favorite themes. This statement here is very interesting. You are lonely, my friend, because you are. So the one thing that throws me off a little bit here, this ends not in an ellipses. An ellipses is 3 periods, but in 4 periods. Now, maybe there is a little bit of difference between how an ellipses is used here and ellipses is used anywhere else in the world. But oftentimes, an ellipses is put in as a stand-in for another word. Often, especially during the time where Rilke was writing, an ellipses would have been used in place of a non-desirable word. I don't think that's the case here. I don't think that Rilke was putting these periods in here as opposed to using an F-bomb, for example, or a person's name or a place's name. Sometimes they would stand in for those as well. I think that this ellipses is sort of the place where the reader is to contemplate. I believe that what is being stated here is not ephemeral. I believe that what is being stated here is not open to question, open to some word as a stand-in for the last few periods there. I think that what is being stated here is actually something akin to, I think this is a plain statement, something akin to the famous I think, therefore I am. You are lonely because you are. Because you are, because you exist, you will be lonely. And look, that might seem to be a troubling statement, but you're the only person who's ever going to truly know you. And you have to ask yourself, most of the day, do you really know you? So, who do you have if it's not yourself? Where I want to go with this, because I think this is probably true, there's the famous old phrase, everybody dies alone. You don't take somebody with you, no matter what it is that you believe about the afterlife. What I want to talk about in correlation with this is that both of the general interpretations of this poem have to do with an emphasis on the creative act in general. Whether this is a poem about poetry itself talking to you, the muse perhaps talking to you, or someone coming to you from the land of the dead, in which case the creative act is implicit but not explicit. Is loneliness a necessary part of the creative process? I'm tempted to say yes, because I believe that a big part of the creative process is the belief that there is something inside you that needs to be expressed. All of us have that feeling some of the time. All of us have that feeling to varying degrees, probably all of the time. I'm hungry. That needs to be expressed, whether through telling someone that I'm hungry, getting on Uber Eats, or expressing it through the act of finding something to eat. Even those small wants, those small needs. Those are expressed in you those are inside you until you express them. If the need for anything is not big enough, it does not become expressed. But the creative act, the need to communicate something in that way, I think that part of what really drives creation, poetry, short stories, novels, music, movies, all of these creative acts, is that that need for expression has to be big enough. And loneliness is where that need festers. When you feel lonely and you cannot express something, that need for expression festers, it grows, it roils up. And I think this does not have to be a physical loneliness, right? Oftentimes, I am at my loneliest surrounded by people because I just don't fit in. And I don't think that's unusual, right? I think that is a fairly common trope about creative types, but I think it's a fairly common experience with people in general. A small point of conversation here could be drawn back to the biblical reference. Isaac, I hope I'm getting that lineage right. Isaac was a fairly important individual in the Bible. One of the Old Testament God's cruelest tricks was the bondage of Isaac, where he was going to be sacrificed. Right? That was Isaac, right? Am I mistaking that? But the question is whether or not it was Abraham. Abraham was supposed to sacrifice Isaac. Again, don't yell at me. Don't yell at me. But the question has to be raised. If we're talking about loneliness being necessary to the creative act, is loneliness the reason that God created creation? God was alone. God recognized that loneliness in Adam and made him a wife. Maybe two. Lilith could have been in there, right? We don't know exactly how that played out either. But I think that is if you were looking for a biblical interpretation here, if loneliness is experienced even by God and we are created in God's image, is that the reason that we feel loneliness? Is loneliness necessitated by existence in general? God exists, so he must be lonely. I think that these are interesting questions to ask and interesting ideas to play with. That is all I have for this poetry discussion. If you like or appreciate what it is that I do here, hitting the like button really does help me out, as it tells YouTube to share this video with other literature lovers. If you find yourself here by chance but not design, literature is the only thing I talk about on this channel, dropping multiple videos every week. There's poetry every Monday, and I hope to have you back for the next one.